Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Lorie Hartshorn, and we are going to get a fresh perspective on, I believe, ourselves today and how we operate in this world. We have a wonderful guest coming up, and her book is called Being Fully Known. Isn't that the desire of all of our hearts, to be fully known? We're going to discover what that means today. I want to welcome Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith to the show. This insightful guest is a board-certified internal medicine physician. She's an international speaker, and she's the CEO of Restorasis, a workplace well-being consulting agency. She's also an award-winning author and the host of the I Choose My Best Life podcast. I love that title. Well, Dr. Saundra's latest book, Being Fully Known, The Joyful Satisfaction of Beholding, Becoming, and Belonging, speaks directly to one of the biggest struggles of our time, I'd say for all of us, the pressure to prove our worth, right? Through performance. You know, in a culture that often values what we do over who we are, many of us find ourselves caught in that cycle of striving and restlessness and discontent. But Dr. Saundra invites us into a better way, a life of true emotional rest, self-acceptance, and freedom from fear-based living. Anybody need that out there? I know I do. I can't wait to dive into this conversation and explore what it really means to be fully known. Dr. Saundra, welcome to The Perspective. It's great to have you here.
It's my pleasure to join you.
Well, thank you for writing this book. Let me ask you, what was the motivation, or where did this book come from?
It's a continuation of the conversation I started in my book, Sacred Rest: Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity. That book gave the framework around my research on the 7 types of rest. And we have an assessment at restquiz.com. We're up to date. We've had over 500,000 people who've taken our quiz to determine their rest deficits. And we started to notice that there was just this high number of people who struggled with 3 specific areas: spiritual rest, emotional rest, and social rest. And so those are the 3 areas that I go much deeper into in this particular book.
Is this something, Dr. Saundra, that you have personal experience with? Was this a journey that for you as well?
That's how it all started. It was not one of those things where I just love research. I burned out. I burned out about 5 years into clinical practice. I've now been in practice over 20 years. And so at that time, I had no desire to change what I was doing as far as my career, but I needed to figure out how to be sustainable in a high stress profession. And that's where the work with the 7 types of rest began. And so it was very organic, just me trying to survive a career. And it's just really been surprising how much it's helped other people at this point.
Well, you know, often the messages that we share are from our own story, right? Our personal experience. When you burned out, did you quit? What did it look like? Some people say, well, I don't know whether I'm burning out or not. What are signs of burnout? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, so the World Health Organization actually has some very specific criteria around describing burnout. Number one is that you're tired all the time. Have a deep level of fatigue. Number two, you no longer find joy in the work that you do. So there's a level of depersonalization from the passion, the work that used to bring you joy. And number three is the work you produce is at a lesser quality of what you're capable of. You're showing up every day, but you're not really giving from the highest level of your capacity. And so when someone has all 3 of those checked off, clinically, we describe it as burnout.
Yeah. And what happened with you? Did you take some time off, or what did you do at that point when you realized I'm burned out?
I actually went to the scripture. That's where I get a lot of my strength and a lot of my understanding. I have a deep science background, but I realized that my medical career really hadn't trained me for sustainability within the profession. And so I started looking at what is the biblical approach to this. And because I have such a science background, I wanted to see then how do I implement that biblical approach in a current day reality of my life. And so I started off by determining what type of tired am I? I think that is the number one question many of us have to sit down with. Saying you're tired is insufficient information. It doesn't actually prepare you to be able to take adequate steps in the direction of improvement. So that was the very first question I had to start asking myself, what kind of fatigue am I dealing with? And that's where these 7 areas came from.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I can relate in my many years career working in different fields of that experience of burnout. And you think, I'm just tired and this is normal. But actually, that's not what God wants for us, right? And this book is so helpful. I mean, our culture glorifies busyness, right? We glorify overachievement. I know I have bought into this because actually it's an identity lie that we have greater value and worth if we're busy or we're accomplishing something, and we can get caught in this cycle of performance-based identity. And what are some of the first steps then of breaking free from this performance-based cycle of identity?
A big part of it is really understanding why we do the things we do. Performance-based identity it typically has us leaning towards metrics to determine our value and worth. And so if I get enough likes on this social media post, if enough people join my coaching program, whatever it is that someone's doing, those metrics then become the determination of whether or not something is worthy of your time and effort. However, if we're working from a deeper level of ourselves, the metrics aren't as important as obedience to what we feel like God is leading and calling us to. And so the celebration isn't in the metrics and the performance. The celebration can then be shifted to your willingness to say yes, your willingness to risk with God, your willingness to have faith and boldness in places where maybe logic doesn't actually make sense for that particular thing because it doesn't meet metrics or performance. It gives us a level of freedom to actually move with his spirit and to do the things that we feel most passionate and aligned with outside of what culture may say is worthy of our time and our energy and our efforts.
I really appreciate that a lot. I would say my own journey of identity, it often was I was being defined by the things that I did. And that is so much the struggle. We feel almost good about ourselves if we can say, "Hi, my name's Lorie, and this is what I do," right? And that's a trap that we can fall into. Do you think it one of the most common traps for people you think in our culture, for many?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's very limiting because most of us try to get our elevator pitch narrowed down to just the things we think will most impress other people, the
Yeah.
things that we are most proud of and that we feel like will validate our existence. And what ends up happening with that is what if that changes? I meet people who say, "Well, I'm a mom of two boys and they just graduated from high school, so both are in college." And I remember meeting people and they'll say, "I'm such and such's mom." And I'm thinking, yes, that's true, but there's so much more to you than that because that child's going to move away and then you're still someone. You're still valuable. You still have worth. I feel like we need to start asking others better questions. Questions like, what's moving your heart? Where do you see the evidence of God in your life right now? What excites you? What makes you want to get out of bed in the morning? Questions that actually get to the heart of a person rather than superficial questions that can change with the wind. Careers change, roles change. What are the things that are the deeper part of you?
Oh, you are 100% right on. I mean, identity and self-worth and the way we see ourselves is critical to the way we operate in the world. And if we're defining ourselves by the wrong things, right, we're going to head down a broken path of exhaustion. We're going to break this down more, but you talk about three types of rest. We all need some rest: spiritual, emotional, and social. You use the words beholding, becoming, and belonging. I love that. Can you just unpack this a little bit? What does it look like in our everyday life?
Yeah, so those 3 come from the full 7 types of rest framework. The full 7 include physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative. And the 3 that I go deeper into this particular book being fully known is beholding, which is spiritual, beholding God in all things, actually, whether it's the things that we think of as spiritual or the everyday aspects of life. How do we behold God around us in every aspect of our day? Becoming, which is emotional rest, where you're not becoming something, you're becoming more aware of God inside of you, the aspects of his character and of his nature. your ability to actually find a level of emotional rest that is an identity that is detached from your performance and your doing and gets back to who you are at the core. And then belonging, which is that type of social rest where you're not trying to fit in, but you're actually stepping into places where you are uniquely needed. I think a big part of the stressors people face right now, and that we've seen with the research and all the data, is that there's this stress and use of energy to try to fit into places where you are not supposed to fit, but you belong. I look at it. My husband loves doing these puzzles, and I'm horrible at it, but he will give me a piece and I'll find something that looks like it on the puzzle, and I think it has to go here. And usually that's not where it goes. It has a very unique spot where it fits, but it doesn't fit in. And I think that's what many of our lives are like. There are places where we don't look like everyone in the room, but we fit there because we complete the picture.
That is so helpful. Wow. We're going to come right back. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with Dr. Saundra in just a minute. Well, welcome back. Dr. Saundra, thank you for outlining those types of rest. You mentioned three, there's out of seven. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the other types of rest?
Yeah. So, one of the other ones is physical rest. I think most of us have had that episode where you go to sleep at night and you wake up still exhausted. And so, physical rest is not simply sleeping, it also includes active forms of physical rest, which include things like massage or stretching, things that actually improve your lymphatics and circulation within your body. Mental rest specifically is looking at how you clear your mind, and it includes things like meditating on the word, mindfulness type activities, things that like even time blocking that help you to concentrate and focus better so that you don't have that brain fog. The other types include sensory rest, which look at the sensory inputs in your day. A lot of us don't realize how background noise actually fatigues us. And so if you're in a particularly noisy office space, you may need to have some sensory rest activities to actually help you not feel irritated or agitated using things like noise cancellation earphones at times, or maybe driving home with the radio off at times rather than listening to music because you need those moments of sensory reprieve. And then finally is creative rest. I think a lot of us have experienced it and didn't know what it is. If you've ever felt rested or restored at the beach or the mountains, or even looking at artwork or listening to music, when creative elements, nature or man-made creativity inspires you, brings that awe and wonder into your life, that's creative rest.
I love what you're sharing with us. I just feel, well, you're a doctor, you're the expert here, but I feel like even as I listen to you, it's such a holistic approach to actually caring for yourself and not getting overwhelmed by all the activity, the performance, things in your life, and creating space and creating margin. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Oh, absolutely. I think a big part of it is a returning to Sabbath keeping. And I know we don't typically in our culture celebrate Sabbath as like some other cultures do, but I think the mindset behind it is one that we need to return to. I feel like a lot of us have excellent work ethics. We have no problem showing up at work early and staying late. We have zero rest ethic. And then we wonder why we're exhausted and we burn out so quickly and easily. And so there's a reframing of how we view rest as a negative and as pulling away. And if we start seeing rest as the place where you get poured back into to do the work that you're called to do, you approach it in a different way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Speak to us about the mental clarity. I feel like with the internet and all the information coming at us all the time, that this is a huge stress factor in people's lives. How can we have mental clarity? Like you talk about stillness. What does that even mean, or what does that look like?
Yeah, stillness has many aspects to it. Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. When I first read that, in my head, as someone who doesn't do stillness very well, I'm thinking, okay, that's going to be difficult. And it is. And I think that's the reality. We have a very busy world. So stillness has a level of intentionality that we have to go into. And the stillness includes times of physical stillness where we are literally stopping activity and being still. There are times of mental stillness when maybe I like to do like mindfulness activities where I may pick one characteristic of God's character, and that's going to be my focus point for the day. So if something pops up and I'm worried or anxious or whatever the emotion may pop up, I am redirecting my attention back to whatever that characteristic of God is. For me, the word usually is faithfulness. And so I redirect my attention back to that as a mindfulness meditative type practice in a way that keeps my attention towards Him. And then other ways of stillness include the stillness of our soul. And so that's where we detach from feeling as if our worth is tied up in our work. And we allow ourselves to get back to a deeper understanding that we have value simply because of Christ and allow ourselves to recline in that.
Yeah. You know what is so good? This resonates with me so strongly. What happens in our bodies physiologically when we practice stillness, when we take time to connect with God, maybe we tune out the noise, we do some of these, what happens physiologically to us?
One of the I share lots of research in the book Sacred Rest, that talks about this, it's specifically around around the spiritual rest aspect of it. And one of the studies that I loved the most was one that talked about how when we have times of communion, prayer with God, that it imprints on our brain in the same way as as a conversation with a person. Like when I sit down with my husband and I have a conversation and something meaningful is said and it imprints on my brain, the very same things happen when I have conversation with God in a meaningful, deep way. And I think when we start looking at just the sense of peace that often accompanies those times, we can see how our cortisol levels are going down, how our stress response hormones get improved, how we end up getting to a place of deeper levels of relaxation within our physical bodies as well. We can see all of the negative kind of chronic health related aspects of stress, but most of those are improved with times of rest and restoration.
You know what? That is so powerful. I think sometimes we forget how connected everything is within this incredible human body that God has created. And, sometimes going back to your point about exhaustion, I mean, some people feel I'm exhausted, I'm burned out, I just need to lay on the couch, you know? But what do we actually need to do when we're feeling physically exhausted, spiritually, emotionally? Versus just checking out. What are things that we need to do in order to actually refresh and reengage?
Yeah, the number one thing is identifying your personal rest deficit, recognizing what your risks are for each of the rest deficits, specifically as it relates to the type of work that you do, the environment that you're in, your support systems. All of those will affect which of those seven we mentioned that you get depleted in. And as I mentioned, the top three that we saw were spiritual, emotional, and social, primarily because a lot of us don't have good support systems or we don't feel as connected to God as maybe we did in our youth or in other times when we had more time in the Word, or we hold our emotions back, which I find is a big one. We're afraid of what other people will think when we share our emotions. So we have these very heavy laden emotional backpacks. Some of our careers have emotional labor attached to the career itself. That was my personal rest deficit as a physician. I'm an empath, so I'm the kind of highly compassionate, cry at the, commercial that's sad kind of person. However, you will never see me cry in an emergency room or an ICU, no matter how horrific anything's happening, because I've trained myself to shut my emotions down in those situations, but I'm still human. So I still have to have times to release those emotions in safe ways. And so I think we have to identify what is actually adding to the fatigue and then be really intentional about getting rest and restorative practices in those areas. And rest is not cessation. It's not simply about stopping. It's about pouring back into the place of deficit.
So, so good. Well, thank you for writing this book, Being Fully Known. There are resources. Just quickly before we close here, tell us about maybe some of the resources or steps that you talk about a 21-day fast and things like that that are in the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the book is divided up into 21 chapters so that those who do the discipline of fasting can actually work through it in a 21-day period. There are reflection questions at the end of each chapter, as well as a QR code that gives you access to videos that go along with the section so you can do it in small groups or with a friend.
Oh, this is an amazing resource. I encourage you to get the book Being Fully Known. Dr. Saundra, thank you so much for joining us today on The Perspective. Go get that book wherever books are sold and do all the steps so that you can be living the full life that God designed you to live. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Saundra.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.